Welcome everybody to Changing of the Hip Hop Guards. It is me, Uncle E. That's my partner, the journalist Sincere. Everybody tuned in. Make sure you take 3 seconds, hit that subscribe button, like, comment, leave, share with everybody. Check out all of our episodes that we have going on. We are kicking off season 3 as we speak. And joining us tonight is none other than B-Boy. Why not? Why not? How are you doing, sir?
Peace. Thanks for having me. I'm good. I'm doing good, man. It's right around Thanksgiving time. So my mother came out to visit me out here in Texas. So we just had dinner. So
Oh, okay.
everything's good.
Good. So first of all,
Hmm.
thank you for joining us, man. It's an honor. I've been a fan of yours for a very long time, so it is good to be able to finally get a chance to speak to you. So do us a favor, why not? Take us back to a young why not growing up. You're out of Jersey, correct?
Jersey, that's right.
Born
Yeah.
and raised. Yeah, take us
Yep.
back to a time where why not was a kid, man, just free out there having fun, hopefully having fun. But what was it like growing up in Jersey?
Well, I was born in Passaic, New Jersey, and yeah, just a regular Jersey kid, man. I was into all types of stuff. Mainly, I think sports because that's what my mother tried to put me into. She wanted me to be more social because I was pretty much like to myself since I've been a kid. I don't think she was so sure if an artist was in there yet. She was like, "Oh, he's gonna play ball." You know what I mean? So
Right.
she's a big Yankee fan. She was trying to push me into playing baseball, football, which is considered to be soccer, but we call it football. My
Oh,
family's
okay.
mainly Italian, so we call it football.
Right.
But that's not really what I wanted to do. I was actually just curious. I like to. I would take apart a lot of the electronics in the house and try to put them back together, and none of that shit worked after I did that. So it would frustrate my mom pretty badly, especially like her favorite radio. I did that to her one time, and she was pretty upset at that. Um, but I think I was just curious as to how stuff worked. That
Yeah.
was like my main thing, and I definitely could say curiosity is one of the biggest things that I can take from my childhood. It's I'm always wondering how stuff works. So um,
Right.
when I first started getting into or seeing and witnessing things like hip hop, like that blew my mind. You know,
Okay.
Graffiti was the first thing I would say that I saw. It was all around, right? I mean, it was in
Mhm.
Passaic, Patterson, Clifton, New Jersey, where I eventually went to high school. Um, I had family in New York, so I was back and forth between Queens and the Bronx every once in a while. I also have family down in Cherry Hill, so Philly is another part of my history, also from my family. So I would kind of bounce back and forth between cities sometimes. So I was young seeing Philly, I was young seeing New York. I was definitely interested in what I was checking out in both of those places. I noticed that they were different. I didn't know why. Again,
Mhm.
curious. I wanted to know. Um, yeah, and you know, visually, I think that was the first thing that got me. The second thing would be sonically, music. Music was played in my household often. My mother used to go to the Limelight. She
Okay.
danced the hustle. So at home, she would do certain things that I wasn't really sure what was going on as of yet. But I heard certain records that I later um, recognized when I went to like one of my first jams.
Right.
And I heard specifically, I remember like one of them was Sol Makosa.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
heard that and I was like, yo, I know this track. And to see like breaking done to it, that fucked me up because I was like, yo, this is different. And then I started seeing like the relationship between like hustle steps and what they were doing with breaking. So I was like, damn, this is crazy.
Okay.
Um, so
What I don't
Soma
mean to cut
Kosa
you, but
was one.
what
Mm.
time? What around what year are we talking about, more or less?
Oh shit. So I would definitely say my awareness towards what was happening and going to events wouldn't happen till about 94, 95. So I
Okay.
started seeing stuff around 92-ish. I was born in 81, right?
Okay.
So it took me up until 13, 14 years old to start to get involved in what I was seeing. Otherwise, I wasn't really sure, you know.
Okay. Okay.
Um, yeah, so I would
That's
definitely say
interesting.
that.
That's
Mhm.
I'm sorry. That's interesting because you figure around 91. I mean, you're kind of almost coming into your teenage years.
Yep.
But things changed pretty much a lot in New York around that time as
Did.
well.
Correct.
As well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting that your interest gravitated towards, like, the graph, the writing, and even like that
Yeah.
that whole aspect. Because it wasn't too common to see kids dancing in the street too much anymore. Well, I shouldn't
Right.
say that. They were dancing, but I mean as far as breaking. Because by that
Different.
time
Yeah,
there
they were
was more
doing
of like the
something else.
freestyle dances. You had like the Pee Wee
Correct.
Herman
Yeah.
and the WAP, things like that. So that's pretty
Yep.
interesting that you gravitated towards that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you could tell
That's
us a
true.
little bit about, I mean, I know the graph caught your attention, but what else was it that made you lead more into I like to call it the more, cultural side of hip hop?
Right. I think I mean, James Brown was the nucleus to everything, I like to say, right? So the
Okay.
minute I started seeing like what dances were being done to music like James Brown music, I was like, damn,
Okay.
so like my first um I'd say the first connection with the music and the dance happened in around the time we went to the Christmas tree lighting,
Okay.
and there was performance happening, and it ended up being the Breeze team was outside dancing, and that was my first time seeing like the hidden street element of the dance being done. So I still wasn't seeing breaking in its entirety, right? I started to see after that glimpses of that on TV. So
Okay.
I'm talking like old school Wednesdays on BET, for example, you know, MTV. Like I saw the Planet Rock video and I was like,
Right.
damn, like the little snippets in the Planet Rock video are crazy. Like to this
Right.
day, like I think I tried to break like what I saw in those clips. And the crazy part is that was done with film, so it was sped up. They were moving super fast.
Yeah.
So I thought that's how you had to do it. So I just started, kicking my feet around that quickly. So my speed that the way I dance now is based off of those clips. I kind of tried to move that fast because I thought that's what it's supposed to be, and that's the thing that really got to me because I was like, damn, they kicking their feet around, spinning this way, flipping. Like I was like, damn.
Okay.
So, man, I might be bouncing around a bit too much, but I
No,
hope
it's
like
it's
this is
okay.
making sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that I think the music really pulled me. Yeah, I don't like. That's funny you say that too, because I was always the youngest guy in in like the crews I was in,
Mhm.
the circles I was in, always.
Right.
So when I first started getting like hip to what was happening breaking wise, I met a couple dudes that were in a crew called Rock with Finesse,
Okay.
and these were Jersey b-boy crew, and they were all older than me. I was the youngest one, and they would tell me, yo, you got to go to the point, in Hunts Point, this community center.
Right. Okay. In the Bronx.
So yeah, so
Mhm.
that was really the first place that I started going to and learning.
Okay.
And at that time, Frosty Freeze would frequent there all the time. Legs at that time had like I wouldn't call it like a class. It was just like an open session, and like people would just go there and break, and he would just like walk up to people and be like, "Oh, try this, do this." Like it was like an open class. It was insane. I met Pop Master Fable there. I met Mr. Wiggles there. So I was already kind of starting to get into the scene directly through Rocksteady without even knowing anybody yet. You know, um, they were just the ones actually doing stuff at that time and organizing. It was really them and
Mhm.
and Zulu,
And
right?
Zulu, right. The Zulu Kings.
Zulu
Right.
Anniversary was like, bro,
Yeah.
that was what it was crazy.
Mhm.
That event was just wild. I mean, everybody was there, and that's when I like so early on, like right when I started getting introduced to hip hop, I'm seeing it in its four element phase, basically, right? So
Right.
people would walk around with black books, that I then later recognized from middle school and high school. People would pass around black books still in Jersey. There are a
Right.
lot of writers in Jersey actually that
Mhm.
I later found out. I met some b-boys from the 80s also in Clifton. So when I went to Clifton High School, there were these guys called the Hip Hop Crew. And this dude, Eddie, Fast Eddie, he owned a hair salon called Headspins on Clifton Avenue.
Okay.
And I would walk by there every day after school. And one day he called me over. He's like, yo, come here. Walked up and he's like, yo, check this out. Walk into the salon and he goes in the back. And then you start hearing the Mexican. He's playing the Mexican. Then
Okay.
he comes out and starts top rocking. And I'm like, what the, like, what's going on with this dude? He's like, you break, right? You a B-boy? I said, yeah. So we started kind of like battling. And
Okay.
that's how I met Eddie. And like Eddie was another connection because he used to live with Lee from the movie Beat Street. And this whole like, there's a whole thing about that. He didn't live with him, but
Okay.
he knew who he was like
Right.
growing up. So I don't know.
Okay.
There's a lot to that stuff, but all of this is like quick, fast
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So basically,
moments that are
it's
just happening in years. You know.
mold start things that is kind of molding you, and where you're getting absorbing everything that's happening and
Yep.
going on. Got you. Got you.
Yep.
What were some of the earlier crews you were involved with?
Really, it was just Rock with Finesse. That was the main crew. Um, and I met Rocksteady around that same time. So like shortly after I got down to Rock with Finesse, I met Rocksteady crew. I didn't get down with Rocksteady till later, right? But this was like my first introduction to, the scene, but then also kind of being taught, I feel like I just had this like footwork, I guess, that people were bugging out about, right? And I think it all stems from what I was watching. So when I saw, for example, that Planet Rock video, a lot of my footwork looked like that. So anytime I met somebody, they'd be like, yo, you breaking? I'd be like, yeah. I'll start doing shit like that. And they were like, yo, this guy's got crazy footwork. So like they would always like want to show me something. Yo, do this, try this, boom. So like it was quickly, I was kind of just being taught without asking even. They would just come up and tell me how to do something. So I think I had something about the way I was moving that they were interested in, so that was just it. And those were the only two crews that I eventually became a part of, but that was it. Like Rock with Finesse was, the older guys in Jersey that showed me where to go. Once I went to the point, I met Rocksteady, and then the rest pretty much is history from that point. But yeah. Yep.
What year was the Rocksteady introduction as far as you joining the crew?
That wasn't until 05.
Okay, 05.
Yeah, but I knew them for years. I mean, I battled in the Rocksteady anniversary in 97, in 98, and 99. And that's when I started like really getting my stripes and battling and stuff. And they recognized me more and more as I kept showing up and doing my thing. So, and then, yeah, became like super tight with everybody in the crew basically. And they would invite me to stuff. I mean, I was doing music videos with Legs in like 98. We did the Moby video. Yeah, I was just, they were bringing me around to stuff, showing me where to go. They would invite me to things like that. So everyone just was like this kind of tight family.
What kind of, what areas, what spots were you going around to get your name known earlier on?
So the point was probably the biggest event space, I would say, because a few things would happen there. You had just these like regular open sessions, but then you had a event called Breakbeats that Legs used to throw. The Rocksteady anniversaries, like if you weren't there, you missed out on all types of stuff at that time. Zulu anniversary, of course, same thing. Now, I wasn't aware of other events happening like in Cali or anything like that yet until I started getting my hands on VHS tapes. Mm-hmm. But like me getting on a plane and going there with like, that's not happening. Like I didn't really start traveling until like much later.
Okay.
I did get on a plane for the first time. I think it was 97. We were going to the Epcot Center, right in Florida at the was that Disneyland or Disney World? One of those, right?
Right.
And at the Epcot Center, they were performing a show called Jam on the Groove, and that was a touring, off-Broadway hip-hop theater show that Rocksteady crew was a part of. So I recognized a lot of people on the stage. I know Ken Swift was there at that time. B-Boy Crumbs, Remind, were on stage as well.
And Pop Fable was part of that as well, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I believe.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Rhythm Technicians and Ghetto Originals were the first two groups to get together, and they created that show called Jam on the Groove. And that was one of the first like real, touring hip hop theater shows. And we actually just restaged that recently at City Center in New York this about 2 months ago.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
dope. That's dope.
yeah, and yeah. So Adesela Asakalumi, was also a part of that original cast, is he spearheaded that whole situation. Him and Fable worked
Nice,
really closely on that show, and yeah, we restaged it. It was dope.
nice. Man, I forget. You kind of, I don't know if saying you have an old soul is fitting for what I'm trying to say, but listening to the dates and years that you're mentioning, I forget that you're, a little bit younger than what I
Yeah.
sometimes think you are,
Yep.
because you 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 have a lot of knowledge, you know what I mean,
Mhm.
and you seem like someone that's been around forever when it
Yeah.
comes to hip hop culture.
Right.
The reason why I'm mentioning that is because when what's one thing that I've always liked about watching when you dance? You
Hmm.
remind me, and I'm glad I can speak to you so that you can tell me this. You remind me a lot of Fred Astaire.
Wow. Yeah.
If that, I don't know if there's something about your style, and just it's the way you carry yourself when you dance sometimes, and your style. I always think of Fred Astaire when I watch you dance, and I've always wondered, like, man, is it an inspiration to you? Have you watched his? I mean, I'm assuming you have, but is there any type of connection between Fred Astaire and yourself?
100%. I'm actually really closely connected to the tap world.
Oh,
And
okay.
one of the reasons for that was I first saw a movie called Tap.
Okay.
Um, that was also something that I managed to get on. I think I seen it on VHS tape first, or it was on TV first, and I needed to get the tape, something like that. But there's a
Oh,
challenge scene in that film.
is that Gregory
Um,
Hines?
Gregory Hines, correct?
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
him
yeah,
and Sammy Davis Jr.
yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and Jimmy Slide is in that scene. He's one of my favorite tappers. But yeah, I started meeting, other dancers, other tap dancers through the years. But tap definitely played a big role in um, the way that I danced. Not even necessarily Fred Astaire. I actually didn't get, hip to Fred Astaire till later.
Mm,
The Nicholas brothers, the Barry brothers
okay.
were like the first dancers that I started to kind of finding. Um, I would probably throw Cab Calloway in that mix too.
Mm,
you know, um, just that whole era of jazz. And the reason for that was like, I kind of spoke a little bit about like my origin story, kind of starting with hip hop, but it really starts with jazz.
okay.
I played the tenor saxophone since I was 9. Um, so that was another connection. Like when I heard like funk and soul music, I was bugging. I was like,
Mhm.
damn, like you can do this with horns, like
Right,
And I
right, right,
love jazz. And when I started hearing early hip hop, it sounded like jazz to me, but more like my era,
right,
Like I was like, this is tight.
right.
It had a different energy to it. And then and then I saw dance to it. And it looked top rock to me looks like tap.
Hmm.
You just
Yeah,
you moving your feet, you're shuffling, you're doing rhythms, and then you hit the ground and you're doing the same shit on the ground. So it just made sense, and I couldn't tap. I have tap shoes.
yeah.
I don't wear them. I don't know what the hell I'm doing when I put them
Right,
on.
right,
I just think of tap while I'm dancing, if that makes sense. So I think I'm tapping, you
right.
know, when I'm up there, and yeah, so
But
it's
you
kind of
you
crazy.
have you ever tried, like, when you just kind of practice and messing around, like, to do what you do with the tap shoes on, though, and
Dude,
just
I feel so
to see what
stupid.
happens?
I tried it. I did. I
Yeah,
feel dumb as hell. It just don't sound right. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Also, what I realized, like with breaking, for example, like you got to be a little more, almost like a boxer, where you're on the ball of your feet and you're a little more bouncy.
Right.
Tap, you're a little more grounded. You got to use your heel
Mm,
and the ball of your foot. So that whole technique to me didn't translate. You know,
okay.
like I
Right.
was like, oh shit, this is a whole another thing I got to learn.
Right.
So I basically put on taps and started top rocking, and it just made all types of weird sounds. So it didn't work.
Okay. Okay. Now so you're talking about top rocking, but you didn't start off top rocking, correct?
No, I actually just went straight to power moves, man. I was doing floats and flares like
When you
first.
first started?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So what at what point did you start combining the two, or what was that
Mm,
transition like as far as going from breaking to top rocking?
I don't know. I think it just over time
Gradually?
it started to take over, but it helped my overall break in to understand top rock a little bit more, and I
How
think
so?
that's really what happened was when I started focusing a lot more on what I was hearing musically, it switched up everything. Even the way I was doing power moves was not the same, and I started
Okay.
really becoming more involved with the music than anything.
Mhm.
So like the music took the front seat versus the technique of whatever I was doing, if that makes sense.
Okay. Okay.
And the
Okay.
and the technique took the back seat. So it's like I listened first and then I reacted. And it's like I wasn't
Okay.
doing that at first, you know.
Got you. Got you. Because you, from what I understand, you're very well known for, like, as far as your dance style, um, sort of dancing to like certain. Sometimes it might be a certain beat that's in the song or a certain instrument that others might not really be, moving to.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? Correct. Which is another
yeah.
thing that I always found very dope about you too, man.
Thank you.
Could you talk a little bit about some of your most memorable battles that you participated in?
Oh man. Shit. I think one of the biggest ones was I'm pretty sure this was 98, the Rocksteady anniversary in 98. I made it to the finals. I mean, I was like 17, and to go that far in an event that big was a big deal. You know, I still see people today that remember that day. They're like, "Oh, I remember when I first saw you." That was the first time people really, recognize you if you're like advancing in a battle like that. Because at that time, Rocksteady was doing uh, the 1 versus 1 international battle. That's what they called it, and people were coming from everywhere. I mean, I was battling people from France, you know, LA. Like it was insane. Um, yeah, that first one really kind of stuck with me for a while, and then I kind of just when I went to get my first college degree, I kind of dipped off for a while. I didn't like even come out very much. I was trying to focus on life and get my shit together. Plus, like battling was I always mention Rocksteady Anniversary and Zulu Anniversary because like on the East Coast, those were the events really. The smaller events didn't start popping up until a little bit later. Like it didn't really get cracking till like early 2000s for like that type of thing.
Right.
Where I guess more of my generation started like being like, yo, we should throw our own events. We should do this. And you started seeing, I used to call them gym jams because every event we did was in a gym. I guess that was the easiest venue to get. There was a whole bunch of those going on late 90s, early 2000s. And that's when you started to see people in your city that maybe you saw on a VHS tape early in the mid 90s. You're like, oh, snap, that's so and so from Cali. Like he's here at this event right now. And they were starting to get flown out, either to compete or to judge. So that whole circuit was really starting, I think, during that time. And I missed a lot of that early because I was in school and I didn't really go out that much and start battling again. So I think when most people got hip to me, it wasn't until '03 and on. Also because then we start getting the introduction of social media, right? Once YouTube and all that stuff started hitting, then it's like everybody's new all of a sudden, right?
Right. Right.
And if you didn't get on those early VHS tapes, people really didn't know you. Rocksteady Anniversary didn't put out a tape, so a lot of the events that I was even a part of, if you weren't there, you didn't see it, you know.
Mhm. Right.
So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, but that
so
was a good one. Rocksteady Anniversary
yeah,
was a good one.
Rocksteady. Um, just also let's talk a little bit about graph and writing. As it go, as you said, it's kind of parallel to your dancing, and when it came to that, what did you have anybody that was sort of mentoring you as far as writing, showing you styles, techniques? What was that whole journey like?
Yeah, not until later. I got little gems during the path,
Mm-hmm.
and then the only person that really sat down and put some time into what I was doing was Mr. Wiggles, but that was later. You
Okay.
know, the first rider I met was Kel First.
Okay.
Um, And I met him because he was dating a woman that was going to that hair salon that I
Oh,
danced
okay.
at,
Okay.
because I ended up working there.
Okay.
So my work study program during my senior year in high school, I worked at the hair salon. Eddie was signing off on my papers. I brought him to school. So I would go like take class half day and then go hang out at the salon. I basically just answered phone calls, and he let me wash all the ladies' hair in the back. It was dope. Some lady would walk in, he'd be like, Tony. I have the apron. I put the apron on. I'm like, let's go, massaging their hair and everything. It was funny. And then we got to practice in there later on. We just moved the chairs out and get down at night, you know. But yeah, so I met Kel first through that whole situation at the salon. And I remember talking to him one day. And at that time, as I mentioned earlier, I was like taking apart shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when home computers started becoming a thing, I was super curious at that stuff, because I was like, oh shit, I was like already into tech, right? So I think I was using Corel Draw at that time.
Okay.
Real basic shit, just trying to draw on the computer, do digital stuff. And at that time, Kel was working on a website called voiceoftheghetto.com. So this is like early on.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Even when he said website, I was like, what's that?
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't like even hip on the terminology of what he was talking about, but he's seen like this young kid already starting to make digital artwork. Like he was tripping. So he was like, dude, you got to come check this out, what I'm doing. I started working on early button designs for the voiceoftheghetto.com website. Okay. So he took me in the city, I think about 2 times. And I think I was in the Frank 151 office at one point. Shit that I had no clue what was going on. I was just there. I'm 16, 17. I have no idea what's happening, but I'm getting exposed to all this stuff, you know? So he's the first person I met, or first writer that I met. The second one would be Resk. Resk was a writer from Rock with Finesse, that breaking crew I was telling you about. He was pretty much the leader. He was the visionary that put that crew together. Okay. He was a popper and he was a writer.
Okay.
Also, the first dude I seen hit a chair freeze, and I was bugging when he did that shit in front of me. Yeah, so Resk, Kel first. Then later on, I start meeting other writers. I met Bomb 5 at the Rocksteady anniversary.
Okay.
And I'm naming specific people who like gave me gems, right? These, I always remember them because they were like, even if it was for a second, yo, try this, do this, like, or I'm just watching them do their own pieces in the Black Book, and I'm getting knowledge from them right there, right? Then Fable,
okay,
you know, also known as Pacer. Yeah, and then eventually Wiggs. So for a minute, I was touring with Wiggs. Now, again, this is later. This is around 07 to 2011 or 12. We doing workshops and stuff together, and like we'd be on the train, and we just doing pieces on the train. And that's when he started giving me like some real game. Like, okay, look, this is what this is. This is what that is. And around that time, I got real heavy into stuff. So I was like researching Ramel Z. And, you know, Mayor 139, I finally met him, who was Kel's first brother, younger brother, which I found out. I said, oh, shit.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And also Mayor and Kel, I mean, Kel showed me at his crib once, like the old belt buckles and stuff he used to make. They were already bending metal at that time. Like this is late 70s, 80s. They were doing that kind of stuff, him and Mayor.
Wait, at that time, they were making their own, the name.
They were doing that shit before a lot of people, man. They were making sculptures, like they tell me like the earliest like graffiti sculpture they saw was done by Phase 2, right? Wow, they told me that. But then they were doing all that kind of stuff. If you see the stuff Mayor was doing like before, and he still has a lot of this shit in the warehouse, like he just had like these arrows that he would bend with like thin metal, and he made a sculpture, and like I think they were way ahead of the game. You know, so all the stuff that I'm doing now, that's from seeing them 20 years ago.
Wow. You know? I didn't realize Mayor was, I thought Mayor kind of, you know, gradually moved into the sculpture part of it, like, you know what I mean? Like as he
Yeah,
got older and, you know, trying to
right.
like play around with different ideas.
You know what it was? It was too progressive, dude. It was too far ahead. It's like Ramelzi was way in. He was in years, light years ahead of people. It's
Right,
just that
right, right.
people didn't get it. They just acquainted graph with being either on a train or a wall and done with spray paint. That's it.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
this
yeah,
dude is
yeah.
making letter racers. He's making tanks. He's, you know, and I think people just wrote him off as a little bit crazy. You know what I mean? But like other
Yeah,
writers were seeing the potential of what he was making. I think at that time, Ramel is a huge, you know, component of all of that, taking it off the wall and putting it in the physical space. You know.
can you talk a little bit about him? Because I was, you know, that was one of the things I wanted to ask you. Can you just talk briefly about him and his contribution? You know, I mean, we know that, you know, you know, was an MC as well. He kind of
Yep.
dabbled in
Straight
a
up.
little bit of everything.
Yeah.
But I'm curious in particular when it comes to the art, because like you just mentioned, he
Word.
was looking at things sort of like off the paper, off the canvas. You know, like
Yep.
he's almost like in his mind, he saw it as something that could actually physically move and had parts. And, you know, can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. And what's crazy is a lot of writers were already kind of thinking that way. They just didn't have the know-how or maybe the craftsmanship yet. They just knew how to paint.
Right.
So even when you see a lot of the early letters, they had a style called mechanical style. And a lot of mechanical style was based off of like things that would actually work in the physical realm, you know.
Okay.
So how it leans, would that actually, if you took that off the wall and put it there, could it sit like that, like on the floor?
Okay.
You
Right.
know,
Right.
a lot of mechanical style was based on this concept of building something, kind of, right, or something that's architecturally sound, right?
Okay. Gotcha.
Um, so that was just a philosophy that kind of went through people like Case, um, early TC5 writers, right? Ramelzi also. Ramel was a bit more philosophical about what the letters meant,
Mhm.
how they were protecting themselves from the letters that came before them, basically. So when a graffiti letter morphs into a graffiti letter, it's killing its original form, which is the, you know, the Queen's English, basically, that letter.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and the arrows are meant for protection or for offense, you know,
Mhm.
and these are missiles. Like he was going there, like that far, like military style, like he was taking all this stuff and arming it,
Okay.
you know. So that's what ended up becoming tanks. Like he physically made these tanks that were letter forms, and then they had arrows which were rockets, and they
Mm.
would, you can push them shits.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
were,
Yeah.
some of them actually shot the arrows. Like he knew how to make shit. Like the costumes he would make, like
Right. Right.
can you can hear sound coming out of the arm. Like he was fascinating to me because, as I said before, I was trying to take shit apart myself. Like I'm not as far into like the play of it like he is.
Right.
um but man, that dude was out there, you know.
Right. Right.
And he was
Right.
half
Right.
Italian, so I already kind of gravitated towards that cat. I was like, okay, what's this dude about, you know?
Right, 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 right. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. His name comes up a lot when it comes to,
a
you
lot,
know,
dude.
yeah, 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 yeah. Very important to the to the whole movement. Yeah.
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 Go ahead. You good? Yeah, yeah.
So somebody else I want to ask you about before we get into some other things is Scheme Richards.
Word.
You know, for a lot of people, or for those that don't know, you know, Scheme Richards, you know, very heavy DJ, very well respected in the culture as well. Can you talk a little bit about him? Because from what I understand, you know, he's a DJ. Obviously, he's DJed a lot of battles, you know, and has a very, very intense knowledge of music.
Yeah.
Uh, Talk to me a little bit about Scheme Richards.
Man, yeah, that's my guy. So I moved to Philly in '99,
Mhm.
right? And I started going to the Art Institute of Philadelphia. I was studying computer science.
Okay.
Around the time that I was graduating, so now we're talking about maybe early '03.
Okay.
For me to pay for what I was doing in college, I was working at an Italian restaurant called La Locanda del Ghiattone, which is the location of the Glutton, basically, is the name of that place. It
Okay.
was on 3rd and Cherry Street, right? So my apartment at that time was on 5th and Brown. So we're talking like East Philly, Northeast Philly area. And I would walk by a place called Silk City, which is basically a diner and an event space, right? So I walk by there every night. This is like an off night. It's like a Tuesday night. I'm walking by there one time, and I was like, man, maybe I'll grab a drink. So I look into the bar. There's really nobody there. I was like, I just go back to my crib, whatever. But I'm hearing good music. So I was like, dope. And I was like, nah, I'm cool. Go back to the crib, change my shoes, whatever. And I was like, let me go back to Silk City, get a beer. This dude's playing some crazy shit, like funky stuff, records that I know. So I'm like, kind of like, yo, that's the shit, whatever. We start kind of communicating. Okay. He's and there's like really nobody there. It's like me and two other people. I'm at the bar. I can directly see this cat who's spinning, and he keeps pointing at me like, yo, I know you're gonna like this one. He puts another one on. Boom, you gonna like that, John? I'm like, yo. So it was crazy. I ended up talking to him afterwards, and this was Scheme, right?
Okay.
And at that time, he was not involved with the breaking world like that.
Okay.
And at that time, too, he wasn't really spinning publicly. He was working at BMW, basically, right? And I think he was covering for somebody that night. Otherwise, he would never like be out, like really doing his thing.
Right.
So he was like, man, I'll just be here, well, whatever. I said, cool, whatever. Broke out, boom. I seen him again probably about a month later at a place called Fluid, right? This is more like South Street, just off of South Street in Philly. So I seen him in Fluid, and a friend of mine introduced me. I said, oh shit, that's the dude, from Silk City, whatever. And now he's around us. And what I mean by us is like the breaking scene in Philly, because he's in Fluid and we used to go there and get busy all the time. So that night specifically, Rich Medina spinning, we in there getting off, blah, 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 and Scheme's there. He's like, oh shit. So we all start to become friends. That's where we start linking up.
Okay.
My friend Brett, who happened to be my roommate at that time, starts to like really like get to know Scheme a little bit. He brought him over the crib one day, and I'm in there spinning records in my room. So he was like, yo, what do he was just amazed at the knowledge of music that I had. Starting from that first night, because he was playing records, and I'm like, I know this. Like, I'm pointing at, like, I'm doing the trumpets with my fingers, like that. Like, I know this record, whatever. So he's just bugging off my knowledge. So we start talking. I start to get to know him. I start to understand that he's a gem. Like, this dude's a gem. I'm like, he started showing me some of the stuff that he got, his 45 collection, the toys and all. I was like, dog, who are you?
Yeah.
And he's just like, I'm Mr. Fantastic. I'm like, okay, bet, but like, what's up? Like, what do you do? Like, what are you doing out here? So long story short, I was involved in some interesting, we'll just call it Italian shit, but there was a restaurant that was opening up, a bar that was opening up, and they were looking for a resident DJ at that time. I said, Scheme, I gave him a folder. I said, fill this shit up with newspaper clippings, whatever, all the shit that you do. If you got a mixtape, toss it in there. We're going to get you this residency, whatever, right? So I walk in there. I got all my flashy, I got my suit on, my shiny shoes and shit. I'm asking for who's Joe. Joe owns this place. Can I talk to Joe? Joe comes out, beat bop boop. I'm talking to Joe, bop, bop, bop. It's my man Scheme. This is it. Got the job, Nice. So he starts spinning there on the regular. Then I start pulling Scheme out into the events. At this point, I'm in Rocksteady too. So I'm like, bro, I'm gonna have you come over here, spin over here, spin over there. Next thing you know, he's integrated in the b-boy scene. So it was like, all that happened in a few years. It was crazy.
Crazy. That's dope. I wasn't aware that that's how he kind of got into the scene like that.
Yeah, and it was easy because he was already who he was. You know what I mean? Like, this dude was already Scheme Riches. It's just the world didn't know who Scheme Riches was yet.
Right.
Yeah.
At what point do you start getting interested in teaching classes?
I got kind of like talked into doing that. My some of the people that I started meeting in the dance world outside of break-in was like the elite force members, right? So I became really tight with Brooklyn Terry. And at that time, he was dating somebody in Philly. So he's in Philly pretty often. I was dancing with this cat named Monsell Durden, who he was already teaching classes in like the local center that we had in West Philly off of Lancashire. So like one day he just asked me to sub his class. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I kind of just like, I did the class like I remember like Legs doing it in the Bronx. I was like, cool. Like everybody just come in, start messing around. I go up to each person, show them a move or two. But I realized that I was like, I don't know, I liked it and I was kind of good at it. It's just the way that I could explain what was happening in the body with the weight and the movement. Like it became a thing for me. And then Terry was basically telling me like, bro, there's money out here. You need to get out, you know? And I was like, okay, that's cool. But like, you know, how do you even start doing stuff like this? And it wasn't until I started traveling, battling that stuff just kind of fell into, you know, into place. Like people just started bringing me and they were asking if I can do a class. And I was like, I guess, yeah, like, you know, sure. You know, and then I started thinking like the only class that I know is classes like I went to college, right? So I'm like, okay, there's, you know, I understood what the idea of curriculum and all this other shit was. So I was like, okay, well, how do I structure a dance class? Like, what's this supposed to look like, you know? And then, you know, being, you know, Boys with Wiggles, I would see him, he would teach like that motherfucker taught everywhere. So it's like sitting in on some of his classes, I was like, damn, like this cat got a whole, he just knew what he was doing. So I took a page from his book, you know, as well, and just started teaching. You know, now I'm at a university, which is bugged out.
You talked a little bit about curriculum. What does something like that look like in Ynot's world? What is the curriculum according to you?
Well, in terms of breaking, like I think about always put, and it's kind of similar to like how I was explaining how the music kind of came before the technique. After a while, I started to understand why that happened for myself, but then I also realized like the evolution of the dance in a way kind of did that too. So I try to structure my class in a similar way and get people to understand and feel the music before they get into the movement, and almost trick them into all of a sudden they're breaking, you know. And a lot of that stems from just my own personal observation and research, knowing that like, you know, a lot of the early steps done within breaking were like old social dances, you know. So we're going over things like the Charleston, we're doing the hustle, we're doing these kind of two steps, we're doing the rock steady, the breakdown, the bump, you know. So, you know, going back and looking at those old dances, seeing what's going on within the technique or the movement of that, how that relates to breaking, if it does, if it doesn't, and then applying it to the two-step, the crossover, the Indian step, you know, our basic steps that we have. And then you bring that to the floor, you know. And I try not to go overboard with technique. To me, it's like you should try to lead with the rhythm, right? So even before I even get into a six-step with footwork, we're doing shuffles. Okay. That's it, you know. So again, I'm trying to follow also the evolution of things, right? Because to me, it's like you got to go back to go forward, right? So a lot of the stuff that I think that we don't realize, and I realized that as a 90s b-boy, that there's a whole, you know, couple decades of shit that I missed. So, and I realized immediately the minute I seen someone that was my peer go into the cipher, and then like legs would go out, and I'm like, yeah, no, that's different. You know, I was already seeing that, but I was curious as to why. Like, why is that? How come he looks like that and this kid looks like this? Like, it just didn't. I was like, what are we missing? Basically, right? Okay. And I did see that, of course, our generation was like physically advancing. Like, I saw that. That made sense. But my curiosity led to, well, why isn't the dance getting better though? Because I see what this dude is doing, but I'm not feeling what he's doing. I don't get goosebumps like when somebody comes out and hits just a few steps and you like, damn, Like you don't even have to do anything. Like you just hit a few gestures and everyone's losing their shit. Like, oh shit, like that's different. When this kid needs to spin until he can't spin no more to get a reaction. You know what I mean? So like that's something I was really checking out, and I was like, okay, the dance and the movement have to move simultaneously.
Got you. I'm glad you kind of talked about that, because we had B-Boy Pro 41 on, and we kind of touched on that. I was trying to explain to him, and I guess at the same time trying to figure out, because I didn't know if it was a generation thing or what, but for me in particular, which is why, people like yourself, Mr. Wiggles, Ken Swift, that type of, even Alien Ness, those are the ones that I always gravitated to, like that the style. And I didn't know what was going on at one point, because it seemed like every time I turned around and saw whether it was a battle, it just seemed like gymnastics. And I'm not dissing it, but I just didn't, what you just said, it wasn't giving me the feeling. I wasn't getting, it was like, oh wow, cool, like he's very athletic, he's dope. But I was just like, there was no connection to the music that was being played, so I've always been trying to understand, like, what's going on, you know what I mean? Like, is it just that there's a whole new thing going on, nobody's into the that part of it? I didn't understand it. And I still don't, to be honest with you. Maybe
I got a theory.
Elaborate on that a little bit more.
I got a theory,
because I'm just and tell me if this is in your theory as well. Is there also a disconnect between a younger generation not learning from, let's say, an older generation? Is that part of it?
Yeah, I think that's a piece of it too. I was fortunate to get like tutelage from, people who are considered pioneers. So I'm a little bit like in a different, category because of that.
Right.
But I also realize that that's also part of like my responsibility as a teacher, right? Because I'm like, okay, not everyone has access to the people that I had access to. So I'll be that person then, But I think there's a few things. Like one thing, for example, the disconnect just generationally, right? I don't think we grew up on that music. So, it's like you say, like I'm an old soul. I listen to older music. I was listening to James Brown while most of my peers were like bugging off of Wu-Tang. Not saying I wasn't, but I also listened to James Brown, Redman, all that. But simultaneously Sly and the Family Stone, Parliament Funkadelic. So it's like that music has a different type of feel to it, even though we're sampling that with hip hop for sure. But it's different when you hear the whole context of a record like that. Now, the deeper connection is why records like that were being made. What type of dances were being done, what was the social climate at that time, all of that stuff we're majorly disconnected from.
Gotcha.
I am for sure, but it's also something I looked into. I was like, well, what's this shit about? What are they talking about? Like, I was curious, so I looked it up. That is an aspect. Also hearing stories. So this is funny too. I'm gonna go back to something you said earlier where it's like, you thought I was older, right? There's been many situations where I'd be around either someone like Track 2 or even Legs did this a few times. Like they'd be talking about something that happened in 70 something. And then looking at me like, right? And I'm like, no, I don't know nothing about what you're talking about. I wasn't even born yet, So I was around so much and stuff. They just thought like I was a part of that whole thing. So I was like, I'm not, I knew nothing about that shit. But hearing stories was a major putting myself there. You know what I mean? like that put me in certain situations where it's like I didn't experience that, but okay, you're painting a picture that I've never heard before,
Right.
that I probably couldn't get from just the music itself, or even reading it from a book. Like you get the full, when someone tells you a story, it's the emotion, it's the gestures, it's like, yo, the voice changes, all this shit happens, right?
Right.
So you get more of an experience, I think. So I was getting all that too. And then the other thing is, well, music is a big thing, right? So for example, like we have these looped breaks all the time. A lot of the younger generation breakers are listening to these looped breaks, which is cool. We were too, but there was a little more to them, I think. There was a lot more instrumentation for sure. Depending on what record you're dancing to, you're gonna hear a lot of other different instruments. Congas might be in there. There might be this little, sound or a scream for a second from a voice. We don't even have much voice in some of the stuff we listening to now.
Yeah.
Like the stuff they play at Red Bull, I don't even hear a sound. I don't hear. I mean, like a voice. It's all just a quick horn rip. It's like an imitation break, basically, right? It's an imitation of something that naturally was there in a song already.
Right.
So it is lacking, and because we are not experiencing that, we are lacking. So there's something about, we have to start learning about what that is, or create an experience for ourselves in order for us to, be evolved dance wise and not just move wise. I think that's the key.
Right.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about other areas you're involved in? What exactly is stylized letter form?
Oh yeah, so that's a term that Fable expresses, right? So he doesn't say graffiti. Sometimes he calls people writers, but doesn't call writing, he calls stylized lettering, right? And I think a lot of writers had their own versions of what that meant. I think graffiti was kind of a word that kind of stained a lot of guys. They was like, ew, I don't like that word. Because graffiti you would call what you might see in a bathroom stall, for example.
Right.
And to differentiate from that, it's like, no, I'm a stylized writer. Like I don't do that shit,
Right.
So I can understand that. It's kind of like the whole thing, like breakdancer versus b-boy conversation. It's like that, right?
Yeah.
So stylized letter forms is basically Fable's way to say, like, yeah, we do letter forms, but we stylize them joints. Like we're bending them, we're shaping them, and according to him, it's like, the rhythm of the music is in those letters. So he's one of the first person I heard say, make the letters dance, right?
And
that was
I quote that a lot when I'm speaking to someone. I always use that reference because I heard him for the first time say, which was crazy because I was like, oh shit, I never really put that together like that. But saw him say, he was like, each letter is kind of like, you're doing like a different move, and I was like, oh shit, that's dope.
Yeah. So that, I think that was a mindset of those who were like dancers and writers.
Right.
It was like a point, like you had to see the funk in the word, in the letter. You had to hear the music in what you saw, basically. So it's like frozen music is this shape, right? And a lot of times, like Fable explains, like he's doing a specific shape that is a letter. So he's dancing his letters, even his movement, so it's bugged out. Like when you think about that as a creative process, to go back and forth between, what's on paper versus what you're doing physically, and then back to paper. Like it's wild.
Yeah. That's actually connecting, because in Pop Master Fable, he's basically connecting the music with the art and the dance all at the same time.
Yep.
Which is also a dope concept, man.
So you got people like Doze, you got people like Wiggles, like all those that are like dancers and writers. Like that was a whole movement, and they all came from the same high school of art and design, mind you, right? So that place is like a Bauhaus almost. It's like a little like place where it incubated this concept. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What exactly is graffiti futurism?
Oh man, that's just it's taking a page off of Ramelzi again. because he called his thing Gothic futurism, iconoclast pangerism, he called it. And futurism, just to me, like I consider myself a futurist because also I studied the Italian futurists when I was in school. And that whole movement of like futurist architecture in Italy in the 60s and 70s is really dope. So yeah, I'm like kind of taking the influence of hip hop, but then also my understanding of like what I try to tap into, which would be then I guess my ancestors or my roots through Italy, and kind of putting those together. So I feel like what I'm making is like a futuristic, almost like Italian futurism movement with writing. So yeah.
So can you talk a little bit? You've mentioned Wiggles a couple of times. What was it like, or how is it? Because I'm sure you still, in contact and speak to him, but how was it absorbing knowledge and being around somebody like a Mr. Wiggles?
Crazy, man. I mean, even when I met everybody basically in that crew in general, I didn't know who the hell they were, and people around me were bugging more than I was. I had no clue what I was, even becoming a part of. I was like, okay. But Wiggles, like when I started actually like learning more of the craft of what I do, and then really thinking about like Wiggles, like and what he actually produces himself, like as Mr. Wiggles, I'm like, this dude is bad, yo.
Right.
Like the level of dance and even music and visual, like this cat, like I always say, like if you see hip hop in the dictionary, should just have a picture of Wiggles in there. You know what I mean? Like he does all of it. You know what I mean? MC, the whole nine. Like he's Mr. Hip Hop. You know what I mean? So, so to me, it's like, I mean, what better teacher could you have? Or even just an example. What better example could you have than a Mr. Wiggles, man? So I'm super thankful to have met him, but then also get that push from him because he really did tell me like I needed to be out there doing stuff, and he really didn't start, giving me the time of day until I started really ringing bells. And that's a big thing for him. I think it's like, yo, if you're not ringing bells,
right,
you're not doing it.
Right.
So yeah.
So a reason why I wanted you to speak on Wiggles a little bit about you've judged a lot of battles, right? You've been to battles, you've had to judge, and I'm sure you had Wiggles be able to tell you a lot of stories of how things used to be and how things were, which kind of, because I feel like with certain type of dances, or I should say dances from New York, let's say that. New York, Jersey, to me, it's all kind of the same. But there was a certain attitude, there was a certain, certain movement, certain things that embody. When you go to these battles and you're judging, and there's someone from like, I don't know, Indonesia, like just a total different country. Is it hard for you to judge these battles and say like, okay, separate the emulating from the authenticity? Is that hard? Because that's another thing that turns me away from watching some of these battles, is that when I see somebody that's from a totally different country, I want to see that person represent that country, not come in and kind of look like New York, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Big time. Yeah.
How do you judge these battles?
Shit. It's tough, man. I ain't gonna lie. Yeah. And also I try not to have at this point, because breaking now is in every corner of the world.
Right.
To not be too biased, I guess, or even a gatekeeper to some extent. You know what I mean?
Too judgy.
Right. Because it's like, yeah, I have my opinion on what the dance should look like, right?
Right.
But at the same time, like I realize too, I'm becoming the minority for the most part in my vision of what I think breaking is. So
okay.
Judging, I can give my opinion, but I also try to really be open to what I'm seeing, right? Definitely along the lines of what you said just now. Like I do want to see like for example, what a breaker in Indonesia is doing.
Mm.
I don't want to see your imitation of New York.
Right.
You know, you don't do that very well. It's not exciting to me, you know. So it's like, what does this look like for you? You know, and I think that's also really difficult to do. Like that shit ain't easy
Yeah.
because there's no other there may be no Indonesian example. So they got to be that themselves. So I think they have a lot of like, you know, sort of like responsibility there too to kind of like really be original because we've seen the imitations already. That's enough of that, you know.
Right. Right.
So it's a tough thing for them, man. But you know, at the same time, there are a few out there that like you'd be like, "Where are you from?" That's
Mm.
crazy,
Right.
you
Right. Right.
know. Like
I
you
mean,
do some wild
I just
stuff,
said
you know.
Indonesia. This was the first thing that came to mind. I'm not
Right?
this was,
Yeah, no doubt.
I just
Yeah,
meant in
yeah, yeah.
general. Sometimes I
But you
want to
can pick
see like,
anywhere. It's out there. You
yeah,
could
yeah,
choose any country you want. It's there, you
yeah,
know. And
yeah,
I've probably
yeah.
been there, and I probably seen it. So it's
Right,
crazy,
right. You know what's funny,
you
man?
know.
I kind of not blaming, but like Ken Swift and even Legs, I
Yeah.
feel like they are probably the most imitated
Oh,
too.
100%.
From even from yeah, from the way one opponent comes out to the floor and the way they're moving and gesturing to the opponents and everything like that.
Hmm.
I always see Ken Swift and Legs.
Yeah, I'm sure
It's
you see
crazy.
pieces of them and what I do too, man. I mean, they and even
Yeah, yeah.
very specifically
But
Kenny like really put a particular way of breaking out into the world, man. And it's like,
the attitude, I mean,
man,
just the facial expressions alone
yeah,
without even
yeah.
moving, like you see that in so much, which is dope. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not like saying that is whack. It's just it just goes to show how big of an impact some of these, pioneers or whatever you want to call them. I know some of them are like second, third generation, but still pioneers in
Hmm.
their own, style. How big,
Yeah.
even Frosty Freeze. I mean, I see a lot of his style in a lot of dances, but it's dope because at the same time they are paying respect to, because if not, it would just die out. Um,
Sure.
but
Yeah, yeah.
but it's dope.
But we give
When you,
respect to originality more, right? So like that's the thing. I tell you
right,
what, I'll bring this even this conversation like a full circle moment would be like what I learned from Kenny was like his influence from Bruce Lee, for example, right?
right, right, right.
What I learned to do early on was tap into what I like
Mhm.
and not related to breaking necessarily, right? So I was into tap, I was into boxing, right? Muhammad Ali was huge to me, right? So there's movements that I do in breaking that are things that I see Muhammad Ali do. For example, the Ali shuffle. That's I put that in my top rock. You know what I
Right,
mean? The way that Bugs Bunny, for example, would kind of like move is the way that I would think about going to the floor. Like so, it's like you know I try to bring that information to the other countries like that, and I say here's one way that, and I try to bring it to a perspective of like okay, an American b-boy would be influenced by what he sees around him every day. What do y'all see around you? Like what do you do
hmm
as a whatever you are, Chinese, as a Japanese? What do you do? How can you pull from that? And that's like you know your ideas come from your culture or what you see in your everyday walk to school or whatever that may be. Like comic books for me were a big thing too.
right,
So every little boom stance and stuff like that, like I'm thinking like boom, I'm spawned, like on some crazy shit. So it's like,
right, right.
how do you get them to think that way? And I think that would help in
hmm
creating like their idea of what breaking is. You know what I mean?
Right, 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 right.
Yeah.
You're into music production as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
Talk a little bit
definitely.
about how you got involved.
Oh man, I think it started just with turntables, right? Manipulating music is probably where most people start, I think, and I just had an interest on doing that on my own. So no one really taught me how to do that. I remember getting like it was called like a battle set. Stanton put out like a battle set. And you get 2 turntables and a mixer with that shit for $500, something like that. And when I was working in that restaurant, I made that. So I was like, cool, boom, got my turntables, whatever. I started learning how to juggle and all this other shit and cut real basic, nothing too crazy. And I would just try to imitate the scratches I heard in songs, because I don't know how else to do it. So I did that for a while. I would go to a record store, buy an instrumental, try to scratch the instrumental, just shit that I saw other people do. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do that too. When I started getting the understanding of some of the music or the sounds I heard in certain songs, then I was like, what is that? And I think what I was curious about mainly was samplers, which I didn't know that's what they were, and synthesizers. I was like, the fuck is that? Because it was not a sound that I recognized. And I played clarinet, I played saxophone, and I played percussion. So I'm like, okay, I don't understand where this sound is going. What the hell is that? So I started to see stuff like that in the different record stores that I would go to. So the Sound of Market in Philly was a place that I went to, and DJ Randy Flash was there, rest in peace. But he was like a guy that like really put me on to the instrumentation of what I was hearing, and he would tell me about it. And they did have some instruments in there, but not a lot. But I remember getting my first MPC 500 from there. So that was my early kind of ideas of learning how to sample with the MPC. And then I think I kind of put that idea in the background for a while until 2015. And then, because I started making some real money for the first time in my life. So I'm like, okay, bet. What am I going to do with this, right? And I started thinking about like what my next 10 years might look like. So I'm like, what am I going to do? And I have all this knowledge with dance, and that's cool. But I also know, like, I don't think my body's going to be able to hold up. So this is I'm a part of something that has a shelf life. So I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with this, right? What other things do I know how to do? I know how to draw, design, graffiti, blah blah. But I know some music theory. I know how to sample. I love making beats, but I never really done anything with it. So around this time, I'm also starting to see people on the internet making hip hop with modular synthesis. And I was like, oh snap, this is crazy. And it's like all my world collided at once in that moment, because I'm like, okay, this is like, when I looked at a modular synth, I was like, dog, this is like building a PC computer. Like, it's crazy. Like, you get the case, you put the components of the synthesizer in the case, you can build your own. Like, I was bugging. Like, I was like, this is meant for me. I got to do this, but it's expensive as hell. And I didn't know that. So like that, it kind of put me off at first, because I was like, do I really want to go down this rabbit hole of information, but then also like into debt, And so I did because I love the shit.
This time, instead of taking things apart and it not working, you were putting things together and making it work.
Yeah, and making it work 100%. Yeah, and it's dope because with modular, like you patch your own signal pathway, right? So it's not like a regular synthesizer. You get, when you hit a key, it starts with a sound. You filter the sound. You go to the envelope like this. It's a pathway that's already set for you. With modular, you can reroute the signal wherever you want it to go.
Right.
So like, it's a lot of sound designing, but because I'm a hip hop head, I found a small community of guys that do hip hop with modular, and they call it mod bap because it's like boom bap with modular synthesis, mod bap. So now I'm like fully integrated with this shit. I mean, I got synths behind me and racks and shit. I got keyboards. I went all in, Yeah. And I haven't really released that much music to the public. Like, for me, it's like, this is my sacred space for now, because breaking used to be that for me, and it kind of became a job. I didn't want music to be my breaking experience, if that makes sense.
Right.
At least not now. I think once breaking really starts to slow down for me, I'm going to push more into the music realm, like fully.
Okay,
so, yeah.
Okay. I remember seeing you posting videos. I don't know if it's around the time when you were sort of playing around with it or started dabbling with it, but I remember you were putting up videos and you were like plugging in. I remember watching it. I think it was going live, if I'm not mistaken. But I remember watching, and I was just like, I don't understand. I mean, I knew what it was, but I didn't understand what exactly you were doing with it. You know if that makes sense. I didn't. You know, I'm like, yo, this is like some. I don't even understand. I don't even know like how to start to understand that.
Yeah, it's a different world. And for the most part, people use that stuff to make like EDM, you know what I mean? So
right.
I think also that world is starting to be bombarded with these people now who are coming in and doing hip hop, and they're bugging because they're like, oh shit, I never thought about doing hip hop with this type of stuff. You know what I mean? But I think Jay Dilla was already kind of on that. Like the way he was using synths at that time, and some of the sound I feel like he was kind of getting to before he passed was like real experimental electronic shit, man. So like this is like he spawned that whole movement, I think, for sure.
Right. How and when did you start getting into building furniture and incorporating the graph? And because that, I remember the first time I saw the chair. What is that? Like the S that you made, right?
The S chair, yeah. It's right here, actually, behind me. Yeah.
Oh, word. Yo,
Yeah,
I was like, man, I would love, dude. I swear, I still to this day, I'm scared to even ask you like how much something like that would cost. But I was like, yo, if I could have an E that I could sit at,
for sure. Yeah.
That would be
Yeah,
so
just
dope. How'd you get
hit
into
me
that?
up, man. We can talk about it because I have I definitely want to start putting things out in the public. And you know, I'm a really weird individual, man. Like I'm not connected to money. I think that in a way most people are. You know, when they see something that I do, immediately it goes into this kind of mass production mindset. You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, I'm not making this to make money. I just want to show you that I could do it, and that anybody could do this, or this is something that we could be doing, basically, right? I mean, that's what Why Not is about.
Yeah.
It's like why can't we? Why aren't we doing this? This is the philosophy of mine, right?
Right. Okay.
So these chairs, or the chair that I made, and I have a couple other pieces, but I haven't really even posted them. Like, I think soon I'm gonna really start, doing small commission jobs, for people who really, are interested in it. And the reason why I haven't like fully went public is because I'm also still trying to see what materials work best. Like this one's out of plywood. I never really worked with plastic before. Are there other ways I should be doing stuff? Like I don't know anyone that even does stuff like this, so I haven't even gotten any help with it.
Right.
But a friend of mine who was an architecture student in Arizona State when I was doing my master's degree there, he got together with me to help me build this. And like he showed me like, okay, you could do this. I said, okay, bet, because he saw my drawings and he was like, yo, this is possible. I was like, I know, but I don't know how I'm gonna pull this off. So I got an architecture student, Van. His name's Van Escobar, and we sat down. And it was like a couple weeks we put it together. And now, so he's like, he would be my partner. So if someone is messaging me about they want, a furniture piece, then it'd be us putting it together. So I'll draft up the design and the idea. I send it to him. He shows me how it works. He sends it back to me, and then we put it together.
So dope. That when I remember when I saw that, because it kind of also took me back, like we were talking about Ramel Z and or even like Mayor, it just was like a different form, some of them are doing sculptures. Yeah. But I was like, yo, how dope to have, like a graph letter or whatever, but that you could sit in and chill. Like,
dude, it could be anything. It could be the cup. It could be the cup you drink coffee with in the morning. It could be this microphone stand. I think like, the way I think about it is like, when you go to another country, there's a particular aesthetic in that country, right? And it goes from the buildings to the fashion to everything. Hip hop is that too.
Right.
So how come we limit it with fashion?
Right,
right. It could be the car we drive. Like, what's a hip hop car look like?
Right.
You know what I mean? What does a graffiti television screen look like? Stuff like that. Like,
well, you see that now even with I just saw Tats Crew joined up with they're doing like I think it's with the NBA. They're doing some jerseys. Like, I mean, who would have thought? You know what I mean? Like,
that's dope. That's dope.
Yeah.
I mean, it's endless, man. I just want to see more people getting involved, and doing stuff like that. Like, I think the word is going to get out. You have a lot of guys now. Like, there's a couple guys that consider themselves hip hop architects right now. Like, one of them's out from Detroit. The other one went to Syracuse, and they have full on like architectural galleries that they call hip hop architecture.
Oh, okay.
And they're trying to do the research in different places, see where people are doing things like this, and starting to curate like a whole movement based on it.
Right.
So, yeah, it's out there, man. I think it's a matter of time until people really start realizing the design potential of what graffiti could do besides just, painting.
Just painting and stuff, right? So, for example, the S chair that you have behind you, does it have like compartments or something? Is it just the chair or is it other components to it?
I'll show you. I have a 3D model of it here, right?
Oh, shit, that's dope.
So if you see the gills in the back,
right.
So there's a little chamber in the middle, and that's for a speaker. And on the bottom, there's a subwoofer. So the chair itself is also a speaker. And the reason why I put the gills in the back is that so it breathes, so it wouldn't rattle like a car trunk, for example.
Right.
You know what I mean? So yeah, it's like I envision these things being more than one thing, or a multiple use case scenario would be like it could be a bookshelf and a chair. It could be a record. It could be a speaker and a chair.
Of records or something on there. Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah. So I always try to integrate like something else that it can do inside of the piece itself.
Yeah. Yo, I'm gonna ask you, man, because I want to know. Man. It might be 5-10 years, whenever I can do it, but I definitely want to be able to have an E. I don't know if you can make an E into a chair or something, but even if it's not
any letter you dream of, we can make it.
Whatever it is, I don't know.
Yeah.
For sure. That's oh man, that's dope. So, if you got anything else before?
Yeah, just one more. How do you feel about the state of breaking in 2023?
Ooh,
Olympics.
It's hard to say, man. And the thing is, like, for me to even have an opinion on where it's at, some of that responsibility lies on me because I'm still so very active, and I know people are watching. I know the breaking world knows who I am, right? So at this point, I do feel like I have a lot of time and energy to start shifting things in different places. Now, of course, there's a huge movement towards, like, for example, the Olympics, right? That's not something I can necessarily compete with, but I can also offer an alternative space that is not the Olympics. Like I work, for example, in theater. I think breaking in the theater is incredible, and it hasn't really been, fully realized yet. I mean, why are we still on stage, like restaging Jam on the Groove? That was back when I was 17. We saw that show. And there's still not really an American breaking show that's been up since then. So it's kind of like, damn, like what are we doing here? And we're always focusing on these competitions, which there's nothing wrong with those, but there's a whole another avenue with performance that we haven't really talked about yet. There's education. As you can see, I'm in a university teaching full time. There's ways, there's pathways that we haven't really explored. So I consider myself at this time someone who can show some of that. Other than that, the state of break-in itself, without me included, is much built on competition, and where we're going with the level of competition is, I guess, the Olympics. Yeah.
So you talked about, like, as far as theater, right? Because can you talk a little bit about I saw the Movado, and there was something that you kind of collaborated with the choreography and everything. What exactly was that about?
Yeah, Movado was just like my vision of what breaking could be, for example, as a movement structure for theater, right? Because what I realized when I started working, especially in universities, a lot of the students that I had were not uh, breakers at all. They never even seen it before, for the most part. Like
Okay.
they're trained in things like gymnastics, contemporary ballet, things like that, you know? So I was like, man, I need to try to get them to, pick up some of this stuff. Now, I wouldn't call it breaking necessarily because they're not breakers. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right,
They're
right.
approaching it differently. So I don't want to disrespect the dance at the same time, right? So, and I'm also not like trying to introduce like this is some new shit. It's breaking. You're just not doing it properly. You know what
Right,
I'm saying?
right, right.
Like I let my students know that because I want them to know that because I don't want to be a culture vulture out here. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it's just like a way of trying to merge dance worlds and getting them to respect and recognize what's a movement that comes from the community of b-boy and b-girl, you know.
Got you, got you.
um and performing that, and letting people know that they're seeing a glimpse into a whole movement that they probably have never seen or understood before. And then if you really want to see it, you got to come out here and see that, right?
Right,
But
right.
also I'm trying to build my reputation in that space and get the funding to pull in people from the community of breaking and get them to show what it actually looks like.
Got you,
You
got
know,
you. That's dope. That's dope. What is Why Not's overall vision for what Why Not would like to leave behind as far as your legacy? I mean, you know, whether it's in hip hop or even outside of hip hop, but what's your biggest ambition to accomplish?
I think just to kind of like when I think about Ramelzi, right, for example, a lot of people don't even know what he does, right? They
Mhm.
just hear his name. I
Right.
mean, he's a mythical character for most
Hmm.
people.
Right, right. Yeah,
um,
yeah.
but he planted seeds, you know what
Mm,
I mean? And I want to do that, even if you don't really know what it is that I'm doing.
mm.
If you see something that I've made or if I created or I do, and you just are inspired by that to do something that you do, I can't ask for anything more than that, you know? So there's something about that, like pieces of information. There's code in there, you know what I mean? And I know like when it comes across to the right person, they're gonna take that and build their own, and that's all I could really ask for. And I think that's something that I hope happens after I'm gone.
Right, right, right.
Yeah,
Right. There's a lot of things that we probably didn't even touch on, like you being vice president of Rocksteady at one point, which actually, if you please do touch on that real briefly, because
yeah.
Pop Master Faber was the vice president before you,
Before
correct?
me, correct. Yep.
So how did it feel to have that passed down from Pop Master Faber to yourself?
I mean, I understood the reason for that and why we were, moving forward in that way and trying to usher in a younger, mindset and generation, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I fully uh kind of had Fable as my consigliere during that time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Okay.
even though I was like positioned as the VP, I would also always go to Fable and talk to him about that. So I think it was also an interesting time for us to like reevaluate what these titles mean,
Right.
and that it kind of don't matter who's called the VP and who's not. It's really about us working together and actually going somewhere with this stuff. You know what I mean? So I
Mhm.
think it was actually really good, and it really developed a good relationship between me and him and the rest of the crew, I think. And we had our ups and downs during that time, but like um yeah, it started to really show a change of mentality a bit, where we're going as a crew, but also like you know, taking a legacy like Rocksteady, where does that go? Where does that go from here? You know, and I went pretty heavy into the realm of education just because I thought like this crew has history. So there's traditions that could be passed down. There's all these things. So yes, we could battle. Yes, we can do entertainment, but at the same time, like, what's this other, you know, thing that we are heavily always recognized in? It's in the history. You know what I mean? So why aren't we going and talking to people? Why aren't we creating those curriculums? Why aren't we being in those conversations? You know, and we have to position ourselves there too, because even though Rocksteady is Rocksteady, like, you know, universities and all these different places, like they don't know who the players are. They don't know who, you know, can even speak on certain things and certain. So it's like, yeah, you know, that was just a part of like what I wanted to do as VP. But, you know, I think we got some really good work done, man. And it's like, even though I'm not a part of Rocksteady anymore, like I'm still doing everything I was doing at that time.
Okay.
So without the name of the crew, it didn't change anything that I do. I'm still doing it.
Right.
So,
Right. You still have your own space that you, because you kind of, even though you were Rocksteady, I mean, you still also Why Not? So
for sure, and same with Fable and everybody else, man. I mean, any of those guys, like they are, of course, legends in their own names. So it's like, yeah, they're gonna continue on all the, you know, the same way we know them as Rocksteady members. So, yeah.
Right. Well, Why Not, man? We've taken up a lot of your time. We can sit here and talk. You know, I love, you know, being able to share and hear your stories. But like I said earlier, we wanted to get to know the person, you know, what makes Why Not tick and what makes Why Not who he is, you know, to be able to share with our audience. So thank you very much for taking the time, man. I'm sure, you know, on behalf of Sincere, myself, Changing the Hip Hop Guards, we appreciate all the contributions you have done and are still doing and will continue to do, man. And it's exciting, man. Like I said, for someone to sit back and kind of watch, you know, someone that came up as a little kid and, you know, just absorbing the elements and all the culture and everything. Because just like you said about Wiggles, you know what I mean? I kind of put you in that same category as far as when you see Why Not, you just kind of feel that whole embodiment of what hip hop is to us. So, you know, we want to thank you. And man, yeah, just continue doing what you do, man. We'll keep watching and hopefully we can connect again a little bit further, maybe when you put out some music or, you know, got your line of furniture going, you know, something, but we'll reconnect again.
Yeah, we will for sure. And hit me up about that, man, because, you know,
I do.
We're gonna make that happen.
I want to know at least so that I can have you know, what the ins and outs, what it is that I have to work towards. You know what I mean? You know, there you go, man. Why not? Thank you, man. It's been such an honor.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate y'all. Thank you, man. Yeah, let's definitely connect some more.